to check back in on our work, to talk about all that's happened over the last 6 months and where we're going from here. So thank you so much to the team here who is with me. I want to give a special thank you to Valerie Vaughn for all your work and getting all this set up and all that you're doing on this initiative. As all of you know by now, I'm sure this is a really important issue to our respective communities and Lynn and Swampscott. It's been a problem for decades and really an unacceptable status quo, I think, in our ability to enjoy the beach as we should and have the level of public health that we deserve. And while that frustration has built over decades, I think we're also closer to a solution than we've ever been. I have an incredible amount of momentum with folks working together to resolve this situation. It is not easy. It's incredibly difficult. It's a complex issue for a lot of different reasons. And that is in part why it has taken so long for there to be a solution. And I'm very grateful for all the folks up here who are working on it and on all of you as well in your respective roles, whether as an advocate or as a resident, as a neighbor, as just an interested party. Everyone's efforts are appreciated and helpful. So we're going to start by giving a quick introduction to the folks here, and then we're going to talk about illicit discharge detection and elimination, both in Lynn and in Swampscott. Those continue to be the main strategy for our communities in solving this issue. Give an update on the complementary solution that we've been exploring with the UV pilot that happened this summer. Talk about next steps for the future, and then I'll also have an opportunity for questions at the end. So for now, I'll just pass it down for brief intros, and we'll start with Chris.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Chris Mancini. I'm the Executive Director of Save the Harbor, Save the Bay. We work from Lynn to Hull on issues of clean water, access to public spaces, and climate resiliency, and I'm also a Swampscott resident.
Good evening. I'm Nick Connors. I'm the new town administrator in Swampscott. I've met some of the folks out in the crowd from Swampscott, and I look forward to meeting more of you. We have a team here from Swampscott that I'm going to let introduce themselves as well.
Thank you, Nick. Gino Cresta, Public Works Director for the town of Swampscott. I'm with the town for just over 22 years, also a Swampscott resident. I've been working on this project for quite some time.
Liz Smith, I'm also a Swampscott resident, and I manage the sampling and testing for the project.
Hi everyone, Brendan Crichton. I'm the state senator for the 3rd Essex District, representing the communities of Lynn, Lynnfield, Marblehead, Nahant, Saugus, and Swampscott. I should also say that the state representatives are hopefully on their way. They're voting right now at the State House with State Rep Jenny Armini, State Rep Dan Kale, State Rep Sean Mead, and State Rep Donald Wong. We've all collaborated on this, and just want to echo the appreciation to everyone here, from the federal, state, to local, to nonprofit levels, and certainly to the community and individuals that are here as well. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Neil Johnson, Lynn Water and Sewer Commission Sewer Department Superintendent.
Eric Kelly. I'm a principal engineer with Apex Companies. We've been working with the city of Lynn Water and Sewer on their IDD program.
Hello, I'm Karen Chan. I'm a project scientist, and I've been assisting Eric in the field with performing the IDD investigations for them.
John Rahill with Kleinfelder. I'm an engineer. We work with the town of Swampscott on their IDDE work, and we also helped with the UV pilot this summer.
And I'm Courtney Eaton, also with Kleinfelder. I served as the project manager for the pilot this summer with the city of Lynn and town of Swampscott.
Okay, I guess I'm starting it off. We're going to talk about the Lynn IDDE overview and updates. For those of you who don't know, IDDE stands for Illicit Discharge Detection and Elimination. The job of an IDDE program is to find any illicit connections and to eliminate them, and then also to document it and report to the public. Lynn Water and Sewer Commission has hired Apex Engineering to implement our IDDE program, and they are here today to give us a report on their findings and the results of those findings.
Oh, wait.
I'm gonna let Valerie just get the slides queued up. So we've been working with the commission on the Kings Beach IDD program now for just a little over 2 years. When we first got started, we were looking at a comprehensive, kind of holistic view of the watershed to try and identify potential sources of those illicit discharges. The Kings Beach watershed in the city of Lynn is a formerly combined sewer area that was separated over the 1990s and early 2000s to be a separated drainage system and a separated sewer system that still has one combined sewer overflow structure that does ultimately discharge towards the beach. That's CSO 006 and 006A. But our efforts were really looking at this formerly combined sewer system that is now separated drain to try and identify potential sources that could be discharging sanitary sewage into the drains and ultimately to Kings Beach. Roughly speaking, there's about 27 miles of drainage. It makes up a little bit, about 13% of the city's watershed. We started off with that field screening and sampling using traditional methods, which was looking for bacteria, ammonia, surfactants, the kind of things that are indicators for sanitary discharges into the drainage. We ultimately divided the watershed into 14 sub-areas so that we could kind of like hone in our field work. And then that work continued through the 2024 and into 2025. In late 2024, we expanded the program and started a comprehensive drainage inspection and cleaning program to look at all 18 miles of separated drain in the watershed. Next slide. So we made use of both that field screening. We were looking at things that also expanded to include some more novel contaminants. So we were looking at pharmaceuticals and personal care products. One of our key indicators of potential illicit discharges is acetaminophen has become kind of a standard marker. We've also tried to expand to look at certain DNA markers that look at both for human DNA markers as well as canine and avian. To date, the wildlife markers have not proved very effective in our sampling to date. We have relied upon some of the human DNA markers plus the pharmaceuticals and bacteria to kind of hone in on where there's potential hotspots in the drainage system. Once we identify a sub-area that needs additional work, we kind of go through a bow to stern look at that sub-area, trying to find where those discharges might be located, get cameras in the system, do additional dye testing or smoke testing to identify the suspect properties that might be illicitly connected to the drainage network. Next slide. So, as I mentioned, we expanded the program not just to be reliant on laboratory data and field screening. We actually have overseen the TV inspection and cleaning of about 17.5 miles of drainage pipe in the watershed. We have around about a half mile of drainage left to complete inspection on, usually due to special access considerations or traffic concerns. Through that process, we were able to identify 6 illicit connections representing single-family homes in the watershed that were still connected to the drain system. They could have been recent additions, they could have been historic connections, but Karen, what was the total volume? Yeah, so about 200,000 gallons a year from those properties was being discharged prior to disconnection, if you added it all up over an annual basis. So not an insignificant amount, but again, we're talking about individual properties that were still connected to the wrong system. So those have since been rehabilitated. So our work in 2025 was to go back out to those 14 sub areas and start looking for where has the cleaning been effective? Has there been any new sources that could be identified? And right now we've kind of focused in our attention on the Marshall Middle School area, which is next slide. That's just some hot spots. So what we found down there, that is some of the original old Stacy Brook drainage network that goes, it's just north of the MBTA tracks, it goes underneath the new middle school and ultimately goes out to Eastern Ave and down to the beach. So some of this is some of the oldest infrastructure in the city in terms of the collection system. So we found several of the side streets that discharge to that old Stacy Brook conduit have elevated levels of these markers, whether they be bacteria, ammonia, pharmaceutical, or personal care products. So we've identified an area within there. Next slide. Oops. Yeah, next one, actually. Oh, sorry, you can say it.
Next one.
I was looking for that map. It's on the next one. Yeah, that will work. So we've identified just approximately 70 properties that we want to gain access to in order to test them individually to see if they might be still connected. So essentially what we're having is some of these side streets, we're finding detections along their drainage network or where they connect to Old Stacy Brook. So these are the properties that may maintain a sanitary connection to the drain. So what we'll be doing over the course of this fall is doing 2 distinct dye test canvassing events. So we'll go door to door and allow for individual appointments where we'll test bathroom fixtures to see if they are connected to either the sewer or to the drain. Those folks will get notified directly by the city and the commission, and then we'll either schedule appointments or go door to door to try and test those properties to rule them in or out for additional inspection. Those tests generally speak of putting dye tablets into sinks or toilets, and then you observe which system it ends up in the street. So it doesn't take too long, a matter of 15, 20 minutes, and you can either verify a connection that is legitimate, so connected to sewer, or illicit, connected to drain. Following that, then we will be doing additional screening and CCTV work to complete the final half-mile of network that needs cleaning and inspection. And then we're just on the reconnaissance drumbeat for the future. So that is continued field screening and sampling moving forward throughout the network. Okay, covers everything. So I'm going to turn it over to Kleinfelder and Swampscott, and they're going to talk about their program, and then we can answer questions later.
Thank you, Eric. Before I get started, I'd like to acknowledge at least 3 members that are here from our Water, Sewer, and Infrastructure Advisory Committee. Kelly Deegan, the chair, Terry Dansdale, Brian Drummond, as well as our select board member, David Grisman, in the back. Thank you for coming out. So I'm just going to give you a brief overview with Swampscott, what we've done, what we are doing, and where we hope to be. So back in 2015, we were hit with the consent decree from the EPA because of the discharges going out onto Kings Beach. Basically, what it came down to was, they said, you have to eliminate the sewer discharge. What we came up with, our plan was, we thought the issue was that we had old sewer pipes, old drain pipes, so sewer wastewater was exfiltrating out of the sewer pipes and getting into the drainage system. So our plan was to start relining all our sewer pipes, as well as the mains and laterals, to keep the wastewater out of the drainage system. So some of the phase 1 improvements we were working on from 2017 to 2023 was we lined 6 miles of sewer main, greater than 1 mile of sewer main replacement, because you can't line without trying to replace a broken pipe. We did 470 private sewer laterals, which has always been a little tension in town, but it was a decision we made way back because we didn't want to go through all this work, disrupt the neighborhood, and have to come back into that neighborhood and disrupt it for a second time. as well as rehabbing 250 sewer manholes. Next slide, please. Phase 2, which we're currently undergoing now, Phase 2A in progress, we're continuing to line sewer mains and laterals. To date, we've spent $8.5 million, I should mention, on Phase 1A, Phase 1A, B, and C. Next slide. Just going to go over this quickly because most of you have heard me talk about this on numerous occasions. So, Phase 2A construction started March 2025. We've got a substantial completion date of March 2026. What this project entails is rehabbing 4,500 linear feet sewer main, replacing 930 feet of sewer main, relining 77 sewer laterals, and rehabbing 43 sewer manholes. The project area consists of Essex Street, Essex Ave, Columbia Street, Huron Street, Duncan Terrace, Erie Street, Pine Street, Curry Circle, and Humphrey Street. So I'm going to pass it over to you, John, if you can talk about where we're going from here.
Thanks, Gino. So 2A, like Gino mentioned, Phase 2A is the first construction project under the Phase 2 of this IDE program. Phase 2B is planned to be started next year, so it would tentatively be starting up in March 2026, and it would go on a similar time frame and end in like March 2027. This project, the town applied for SRF funding, which provides low interest loans to help with the financing of this project. The work would include about 7,000 linear feet of sewer rehab, 580 feet of sewer replacement, 108 sewer laterals, and 43 manholes for rehabilitation. This project area is more focused on the eastern portion of the Phase 2 area. Forest Ave, Sherwood Ave, Reddington Street, King Street, Sheridan Road, Monument Ave, Walker Road, Thomas Road, Shaw Road, Paradise Road, Earl Street, and Ocean Street. So these are two fairly significant construction projects, and by the time both of those are finished, we'll have a much better handle on the entire Stacy's Brook drainage area, rehabbing all of those pipes. Separately, the town also did a project recently focused on Fisherman's Beach outfall, that specifically the outfall in the vicinity of Puritan Road and Marshall Street. This had had some very high bacteria readings over recent years, and this was another smaller IDD effort the town undertook as part of the consent decree. So this project started up late 2024 and finished in June 18th, 2025. It included about 1,000 feet of sewer rehab, 1,300 feet of sewer replacement, lining of 53 laterals, and rehabilitation of 35 manholes. And this was, in the vicinity of Fisherman's Beach, Puritan Road, Humphrey Street, Cedar Hill Terrace, Greenwood Ave, Aspen Road, Fuller Road, and Ocean View Road. It didn't provide an extensive list of bacteria results here. The town is doing a significant post-construction monitoring for both projects. It's integrated into all of their construction projects, do testing for bacteria throughout the project areas. But EPA does periodic sampling as part of the consent decree, and they did their most recent sample in August 2025. And then before that was September 2023. And, albeit this is one data point, but it has shown significant improvement over the last couple of years. Stacy's Brook outfall went from 10,462 counts per 100 milliliters to 160 counts per 100 milliliters. And that Marshall Street outfall at Fisherman's Beach went from 1,376 in 2023 to 97 in 2025.
I didn't share it. All right, so we'll switch gears a bit now and talk about the UV pilot program that went on this summer. I'm guessing that a lot of you were familiar with and or drove through the pilot project area, so probably very familiar with this. So go ahead and go to the next slide when you get a chance now. Just to start out, we wanted to review the project objectives. So our primary objective for the piloting study was to evaluate the UV disinfection performance under dry and wet weather conditions, but in an in situ, what we call in place format. And then a couple of secondary objectives, if you will, were to gain operational experience on the UV technology in this particular application. We have a lot of experience as an industry with UV in wastewater, but typically, it's at the end of a treatment process. This is it's a different application of this. And so we wanted to understand, what are the operational challenges with UV if this were something to move forward. And then again, the secondary objective is to look to see if the UV unit would improve the public access to King's Beach during the period of pilot study. So again, I'm guessing most of you either drove by or walked around or to some degree saw this in person. This is an aerial view of our site at the intersection of Humphrey Street and Eastern Ave and Ocean Street on the other side. We had a number of pieces of equipment that occupied the intersection. A generator over on Ocean Street, of course, to power the units. We had the pumps that pumped the water up from the culvert. On the Lynn side, they sat in the median, and on the Swampscott side, they sat on the sidewalk. Those pumps then pump the drain water that runs through the culverts up into the UV system where it was treated through the UV system, and then it discharged by gravity back into the Swampscott culvert. It's a little bit hard to see, but the existing culverts are kind of roughed in there. You can see how they're aligned with a road in between. And this next slide is just some pictures of the units up close. There's the pump at the top. We had some temporary pumping systems for each side of each culvert. And then we had the UV system. That's a picture of it being installed. And a picture of really up close the UV light arrays before we put water into the unit. I'm going to pass the mic quickly to Liz. Liz was in charge of the sampling, and she's going to just talk about the sampling locations.
So this slide shows you the 5 different locations that were sampled during the days that the pilot was operational. We had a team of incredible, dedicated volunteers and a supervisor who included 8 college science majors, and they came from Lynn, Swampscott, Marblehead, and Salem. They were led by Swampscott resident Lola Martin. Their training was provided by the testing equipment suppliers, and they were able to spend some time before the pilot was operational, getting some experience and hands-on experience and practicing. They tested and sampled the untreated combined effluent and the post-treatment effluent, which are location 3 is untreated, location 4 is treated. They tested those for enterococci bacteria and 7 other parameters, including chlorine, ammonia, and turbidity, which is a measure of suspended solids and the opacity of the water. Water needs to be clear for the UV treatment to work in order for the light to penetrate and deactivate the bacteria. So that measure was incredibly important. Swampscott resident Matt Pelland created an app and database for the project that merged and tracked all the results, making it possible to compile the data that underlies all the findings. These testers were diligent, reliable, and deeply committed. 7 days every week from May 26th to August 29th. 2 to 4 testers met at the lab in Swampscott and then walked down to the site to collect samples. And some of the tests were processed on site and some of the samples were brought back to the lab for processing. When the UV system was operating, samples were drawn from all these sites that you see here. When it was not operating, the team tested both outfalls, so the Lynn outfall and the Swampscott outfall, as well as the beach water on the Swampscott side, so location 5, to build an understanding of baseline conditions. This team also kept a daily watch on the UV system. They were the ones who were there every day taking a look, listening to the pumps, looking at the UV system. They were kind of our first, all of us were kind of the first eyes on the system. When something wasn't right, they sent up an alert so that maintenance and cleaning could be performed, helping to keep the entire system running smoothly. One of the best things of this whole project, from my standpoint, is working with these passionate young people who reinforced the idea that the pilot was about more than testing and data. Everybody was committed to the goal of protecting the coastline, improving water quality, and showing what's possible when our communities who share this beautiful beach work together.
Thanks, Liz. We could not have done it without you, your team, for sure. All right, so we'll run quickly through a few of the outcomes and results from the pilot. There's a report online accessible on both the city's and town's websites. So this is just a highlight of some of the key information in there. Quick facts, we operated the pilot from June 20th to August 17th, a total of 59 days. And we think it's important to note that there were some days that we were fully offline with some operational issues, and there was no sampling around the UV unit itself. 14 days of the 59 we were partially offline, and then some sampling was still conducted during those times. And of the 53 days of either full or partial operation, 41 were dry and 12 were wet weather days, which was greater than 0.1 inch of rainfall. It just gives you an idea of the number of operational days, and that'll be important here in a moment. We'll go quickly through some of these results slides. If you want to move to the next one. So a little bit small for those of you in the back, but on the x-axis is the dates of sampling, and on the y-axis it's showing, in this case, the rainfall in inches. The blue bars show the rainfall, and then we just note in the orange and the yellow, I just said that backwards, but the yellow is partially offline days and the orange is fully offline days. And this is important because you'll see these bars show up in a couple of subsequent slides. Move to the next slide. Oh, can you move to the next slide, Madeline? There we go. Thank you. Thank you. So where did we start? This is a graph that shows the bacteria levels that were in the Lynn and Swampscott culverts without any UV treatment. So what we considered were the levels going into the UV unit itself. I think the important takeaway here, let me just orient you a moment. On the y-axis here is the level of bacteria measured by Enterococcus in counts per 100 mil. And the purple, thank you, John reminds me, it's a log scale, so it helps to be able to see all the data a little easier. condenses it. The purple squares are the Swampscott, Stacy's Brook side, and the orange squares are the Lynn culvert. The red dotted line is the beach action level of 104 counts per 100 mils. So hopefully that orients you a little bit to the graph. And I guess what you can see is that it bounces quite a bit, a lot higher than the 104, some lower. So a lot of variability in the influent bacteria in the Stacy's Brook and the Lynn culverts. We can move to the next slide. All right, so this is a busy graph, and I know it's small for those of you in the back. I think the keys that you can focus in on, again, this is showing the daily bacteria sampling taken. The orange bars, which are in general taller, are the UV influent. And this is a combined untreated flow, so it's a combination of both of the culverts together as they enter the UV unit. And then the green bars, which are in general shorter, is the UV effluent, so it's the treated flow. Again, we've got the red dotted line that's horizontal. It shows the action level at 104. We're still on a log scale on the right, on the y-axis. And then the black dotted line shows the detection level for bacteria. So some of the takeaways here, you still see the variability in the red bars as they bounce around throughout the summer. The green bars are a little more steady and well under the red dotted line, but also under the detection level. So that's how the influent to the UV system compared to the effluent of the UV system, the in and the out, the untreated versus the treated over the course of the pilot study. Something else we were looking at, and Liz mentioned this, we measured throughout the study two variables, turbidity and UV transmittance. Turbidity, actually really both of them measure the clarity of the water. And so we can see that the UV transmittance is in the green. And in this case, I'll mention that the y-axis is a straight scale at this point, measured in tens. Percentage, UV percentage. So you can see that the UV percentage generally, if you look at all the green line going across the top, hovered between 70 and 90%. And that's a really, indicates a really clear water generally. We also measured the turbidity, which is the red bars, and those hover around 10 NTU, which is the measure of turbidity, except during some rainfall events, you'll notice. So those are the blue dashed boxes, represent those rainfall events. And so you'll notice that during most of those rainfall occurrences, the turbidity would spike a bit. And it really varied depending on the event. But we did see that value go up, which meant that the clarity of the water tended to drop off as the rainfall event would occur, and then it would drop back to a clearer level as the rain passed. All right. Moving along then, these are results that we wanted to use to compare DCR results with our beach closure grab samples. And just again, to orient you, we're back to a log scale on the y-axis. The red line is the 104, the action level, and the 10 is the detection limit, the black dotted line. And the purple represents the grab samples at Eastern Ave that were pulled by DCR, not the pilot team. So again, a lot of variability here that we saw over the course of the pilot. We thought we might see some correlation with the weather events, but it wasn't as apparent as we hoped. So this is what determined the action at the beach, whether open versus closed. So we took a look at this then and said, all right, what does this mean for the testing? And what was the impact, the potential impact of the UV system on the beach this summer? And it's hard to look at it isolated in one 59-day event. So we did look at it just for 2025, but we also wanted to compare it back to some past years. So we went back as far as 2021. And in this case, the chart is showing you 2021 through 2025 on the x-axis, and then the number of days of exceedances in the dark blue bars during the study period. So that's exceedances of the one of course, correct? Thank you. At the Eastern Ocean sampling location. And then the number of wet days that we had during the study period. And particularly the reason we were looking for that is to understand how 2025 compares or compared the precipitation level to some of the past years. Because naturally, if it's a drier year, you might expect to have less exceedances. So just looking at the blue bars, you can see that 2021 to 2023, there was an increasing level of exceedances. 2022 was a particularly dry year. And then in 2024, the exceedances came down, and in 2025, they dropped pretty dramatically. 2025 was a drier year. You can see that it's kind of in between 2021, 2023, 2024. And so that was curious to us and encouraging as well. All right. And then I think this is the last graph. So that would be great if you would have taken a happy day for that.
This one was a little bit funky, so we did compare DCR take samples at the mouth of the outfall, not just the beach. They have a fourth sample location that's at the mouth of the outfall. So this isn't measuring the water in the ocean, and it doesn't determine beach closures. But we wanted to compare this to the effluent from our UV system. In a perfect world, the effluent would be the exact same as what's coming out of the outfall. As you can see on the graph, the orange line is what DCR's sample results were, and the green line is what our UV effluent results were, which is what we had shown previously. So obviously they're not the same. There's a bit of a difference there. We did discuss this in the report a little bit, and there is potentially some future opportunities to isolate what those differences could be caused by. Just as an example, there were various things we brought up in the report that could be reasons for this, including there could be the walls we had in the culvert that were blocking the flow so that it pumps through. Those could have been leaking a certain amount of flow through them. There were just wooden stop log planks in the culvert. There was a gasket in there that was hopefully to be watertight, but it's possible that there was leakage through that, which could have been contributing, untreated flow to the outfall. It's also possible that there was a lot of sediment and algae build up between the outfall and the UV system, even though it's like 100 feet or so between the outfall. And so there was a bit of pooled water that kind of stayed in there and built up and kind of discharged over that. So it's possible this would require further analysis, but that there was sort of bacteria growing within that natural material in the outfall, which kind of created that difference. And I'll just mention too, these samples were taken at different times. DCR did their sampling first thing in the morning, and our pilot volunteer team kind of did the sampling when they had availability during the day. And they also used like a different test method than we did. But both are EPA approved, but they did use a different test method, so that could be another factor in the difference. But this is something that certainly would be something to follow up on in a future next step.
Thanks, John. All right, quickly, we'll just talk through some of the operational challenges. As you might remember, I mentioned that this was one of our objectives to kind of understand what a system like this might face. And we talk about this a bit also in the report. This just highlights some of those challenges. Seaweed was definitely something that we struggled with throughout. We went through different iterations to try to manage that, but it was definitely an issue. Tide itself, it can be an issue, just for managing the debris, the seaweed, and then we had a lot of debris and trash, honestly, that came down the culvert at us from the other side. And so, all these things are elements that we'll want to consider if something were to move into a next step. All right, and with that, last slide. Key results and outcomes. So, we showed you a lot of graphs, and hopefully you'll remember back to one of the first ones, but we were able to show that UV can effectively treat this dry weather flow from the culverts. Again, dry weather. But we were also looking to understand what might happen during wet weather, and whether that effectiveness was still there, reduced, or what. And particularly we saw that that wet weather would impact the clarity of the water, which had an impact on the UV effectiveness, but it would also recover pretty quickly, leading to a rebound or reduction in bacteria again fairly soon after the end of a rain event. We showed with some of the data that there does appear to be a reduction in the number of beach closures this year over previous years, even under a dry weather or a drier summer condition. And then, as we mentioned, there were a lot of O&M or operation and maintenance challenges that we encountered that we would need to think about in design of anything more in the future. With that, I will hand it back to John. Oh, I'm sorry. I had one last slide. I'm so sorry. I think it's important to thank all the folks, and this may be happening later, but thank the City of Lynn, Town of Swampscott, Lynn Water and Sewer for all of your operational and maintenance person power. That was really key, as well as the volunteer sampling and data team. Liz mentioned many of them. Liz, we thank you as well. And then some of the vendors and contractors that helped us to get this to become a reality was really important. So with that, I would hand it over.
Thank you. Thanks so much to Courtney and John, Fine Posting, and Liz. I want to echo the gratitude. It was a great deal of effort for that to be possible, including a lot of volunteer work with Liz and her team, and some really challenging on the ground work with Neil and his team at Water Sewer, and Gino and his team at the Swampscott DBW, as well as all the vendors, ISD. It was a huge team effort, and I also just recognize that it's an unwelcome presence to some of our neighbors, and I want to acknowledge that as well. So now we've covered the Lynn source elimination, the Swampscott source elimination, and then what happened this summer on the UV pilot. And next, we want to say a bit about what we think is next, and then we'll open up for Q&A. I do want to acknowledge a couple of the commissioners, the Lynn Water Sewer Commission, who are here, Michael Salona and Robin Grace. Thank you for being here, as well as Ward 3 Councilor and Water and Sewer Commissioner Coco Allenson. So for next steps, you will continue with IDDE, the source elimination, as the main strategy. And hopefully you got a sense of what exactly that looked like in that part of the presentation. But everything that we're doing on IDDE will continue full board, and we continuously are asking what we should be doing there, if we could be doing more, and appreciate the update from Water and Sewer and Swampscott on the IDDE. We also got some great information this summer about the complementary solution that we've been evaluating in the UV pilot. And, you know, the long-term question there for some kind of permanent installation is how much that would cost and where we could put it. I think from our experience this summer, we've seen that in order to truly answer those questions, we need to know more from an engineering perspective of what exactly the kind of UV solution that would work here permanently would entail. A lot of you would remember the 2023 report that canvassed the different alternatives, and you saw the UV identified as a potentially a feasible option, which was incredibly high level. That, you know, some assumptions about how big it would be, how much would need to go into achieving the goal there. I think based on what we've learned this summer, we have the team has thoughts about potentially whether that could be smaller than what was originally envisioned, exactly how to build it, if there's a way to build part of it actually into the culvert itself, which would make it a lot less intrusive presence at the street level. And whether there's a way to break it up between the Swampscott culvert and the Lynn Swampscott, which is the Lynn culvert, which is similarly reduced the physical presence of whatever the system is above ground. So in order to answer those questions, taking what we've learned this summer, we want to get a more in-depth feasibility report study that would, we think, be necessary before we do an actual site selection. Because if we were to do a site selection now, we wouldn't know what kind of site we need in terms of how big it would need to be and what the site requirements would need to be, and so on and so forth. So that we believe is the next step with respect to the permanent UV installation. And we're also looking at, is there a way to run a temporary system again next summer? And there's some things that I think we think would need to happen in order for that to be the case. One of them would be to get power to the site, which would obviate the need for a generator. And that's a request that we had put into National Grid originally and have reiterated to them, and we'll continue to work on. And then we need to identify funding sources for that to occur. And that's something that Lynn and Swampscott will be working with, as well as the delegation, state and federal, and honestly, it would be an open question that we need to answer together over the course of the next several months. So I want to turn it over to the Swampscott team to add to that.
Thank you. I think I'll turn this over to Gino for more detail, but at a very high level, I just want to highlight that this is great information, great data that we got. We also want to have Kleinfelder and Gino before the select board in town as well, to make sure everyone is on the same page with our next steps and moving forward. I think that's an important immediate step for us in terms of moving any solution forward and talking about funding, that type of thing, as you said, is a longer term discussion between the communities and our delegation at the state level. But for specifics, I'm going to turn it over to Gino based on the work that's been done.
Thank you. So as far as Swampscott is concerned, our next steps, similar to Lynn's, we're going to continue with IDDE, and we're going to continue to work with our partners for the City of Lynn, state, federal delegation, to continue to ensure that residents of both communities have a clean beach.
Does anyone else want to say anything high level before we go up to the questions? The only thing I'll add before we open to the questions is that I want to thank what the Swampscott team for what they just said, and just point out that this level of collaboration that we've had between the two communities has been incredible, and I think doesn't mean that we've yet fixed the problem, and ultimately that's what we're all gonna hold ourselves to in terms of the ultimate goal. But in the meantime, having this level of collaboration has been much appreciated, and you can see that we're making real progress as a result. So if no one has any other high-level comments, let's open it up to questions. Valerie has a.
Hello, testing.
First, I'd like, can you hear me? Yes. Okay. First, I'd like to say I greatly appreciate everything you're all doing. I know it's difficult, but in all that dialogue that you just went through, could you tell me, are you planning another pilot program at that location next summer?
Is that the only question, or?
No. Okay. That just starts the conversation.
All right. Well, we're doing questions, so it's.
Well, that's a question.
That's a question.
That's a question. Could you answer it? Because that sends the conversation in another direction. Is it yes or no?
Yes or no? Are we planning?
Are you planning another pilot program at that location next summer?
Yeah. So I think what we just talked about next steps. We talked about for next summer. That is something that we're looking at, but there's a couple things that would need to happen for that. That was what we're talking about in terms of being able to finance it. And
But
then,
is it a possibility? Yes. Chris.
So hold on. Is it a possibility?
That you will have a repeat UV pilot program at that same location next summer?
When you say repeat, it wouldn't be the same as what it was last summer.
I should hope not. So could you tell me, will there be another UV program pilot site there next summer?
Right. So
Chris can answer if Chris is better at giving me an answer.
excuse me.
I think
Chris could answer if.
I think the mayor already answered it in their comments.
No, what he said was, there may be this, there may be that, we got to look at the information. We've had this
Because we
conversation.
don't know.
Well, I know that, but is that on the table?
Yeah. Yes, it's on the table.
Okay, so my name is Jeff Shelgren. I live at 27 Ocean Street. My husband and I, Steve Harrington, live there. Our experience was horrible this last summer. So you can see where I'm coming from in the fact that if you're going to repeat that, then I have issue.
But you see,
And
that's the thing. It's not
the
going to
issue-
be
the issue
repeating
comes-
that.
Well, no, but the issue comes with the fact that we had incredibly big problems with the noise. We were prisoners in our homes. And I know you can gloss over that, and really what it came down to is there were some poor decisions made about the equipment. And so in our attempts to try to get that corrected, the entire front line here basically dismissed us and kept entrenched in a way that didn't allow that conversation to occur. In all of this information you're giving us, there's no noise study tests. And we actually had the noise study done because we wanted to demonstrate what we were experiencing. And the noise study identified that the noise levels coming from that equipment were in violation of DEP noise regulations. And just so you can appreciate it from a person perspective, we're directly across the street. Standing in our driveway, our parking lot, our yard or our deck, it was like being next to a highway. Being in our homes with the doors and windows shut, it was like being in the cab of an airplane with the constant hum of engines. And so sleep was difficult. There were no social events, as summers typically do. There were no social events because we couldn't invite anybody into that environment. What we see is that you made some mistakes on your choice of equipment. And then you became entrenched and you refused to acknowledge that or resolve the issue. I know there were PR elements out there that said, oh, we put up taller fencing, we put up blankets. What that did is because of the elevation of the homes, it actually directed and funneled the noise more completely to these homes around there. And so what we ended up doing is getting into more of a suffering situation as you try to correct the situation. We want to make sure that that's not going to happen again. And
what I'd like to kind of bring this into a human perspective is that, you know, the DEP regulations are there for reasons. As we see, this is my opinion, you violated those regulations. Those regulations have health impacts. The weekend before the shutdown of the UV pilot program, my husband was taken to the hospital for a pulmonary embolism. He was there for 4 days, and the medical staff that attended him identified that, you know, he's lucky to be alive. We asked him, so what was the cause of the pulmonary embolism? He said, well, we can't really pinpoint that, but stress is a major factor. And so we spent 2.5 months of no sleep and just trying to avoid the situation and going back and forth with this group and getting no answers. So when you tell me that there's a possibility it may repeat itself and that you won't be repeating some of these same elements, I have little trust. You have affected our lives. You took away an entire summer. And you were so entrenched in that you wouldn't acknowledge the fact that you really didn't even listen to your Kleinfelder report, which said, yes, the UV program is good at that location. However, don't use diesel engines. Then if you look at the specification from the manufacturer, it said that when you operate these engines at a normal level, it's 20 to 30 decibels above the state limitation. So over and over again, you became so entrenched that you wouldn't listen to the people who were actually suffering. And we are constituents, voters of this town, and you stripped us of any representation whatsoever because you were entrenched in what you were doing. And so I just want to make sure that you understand that when we go forward with this discussion, that we are opposed to anything else down there. We have lost a summer already. I almost lost my husband. And we sitting here talking about these theoretical situations where if this happened, this would happen, and then you coming in next summer and putting in another UV program, that's unacceptable to us. And again, I have to say that I have every respect for all of you. You do tough work, and you're turning over all the rocks trying to find the answers. And that is highly admirable. And so I'm not saying anything about that. I highly support the goal of cleaning the beach. I'm a 30-year resident at that location, and I have watched the lack of anything happening for 30 years. Now that something's happening, I'm excited about it. Again, speaking loud enough.
I'm just thinking everyone behind you, you're not.
So we're thrilled that that's happening. But you made a mistake in the equipment choices that you made, and you became entrenched, and you made us suffer for it. That's what I'm saying. And so listen to your consultants. Do some research on this equipment. Fix it. Listen to the people who are complaining that are on the front line. You go home to dinner. You go home to weekends. You go home to peaceful sleep. We can't. And so I stopped there. But you can see the passion behind the pain that you injected upon a small community that is your constituents, that you were elected to protect. So,
Yeah, no, thank you so much. I'm sorry about what happened to you, Steve, and I hope you're better and continue to recover. I appreciate your support for our broader efforts, Jeff, and that means a lot. And I think my colleagues are always happy to hear from you, and will certainly take the feedback. I would disagree in your characterization of the report. Jeff, I'm answering your question here. And we're taking questions about the diesel engine. But again, appreciate the feedback you're sharing and the experience that you've had. So thank you. Does anyone else?
I'm not going to contend anything you said because I think it's all true. But one thing the mayor just said before we wrapped up the presentation was, if there's a UV plant, it only can. You said this today, just about 5 minutes ago, and you've said it in our steering committee meetings that it only works if we have national grid power. So there won't be. I'm not a politician. I'm not elected, but my understanding is there will be no diesel generators there. That's not. We heard what you all said. We're not going to put it back. If there is a UV system, it's only going to be if we get direct power, which is what's powering the rest of the city.
So the diesel engines weren't the only problem. So the pumps themselves were also a big problem. As they became under stress, they became louder and they had a very shrill noise to them. And as you have said yourself, there were many days where they were under stress for whatever reason. And so many days, in addition to the diesel noise, we heard this shrill screaming from the pumps. And those were electric. And so what we're saying is that there are a lot of issues that are going to be coming up regardless of what equipment you use. Your responsiveness is what I'm seeking, is not being entrenched, not actually burying your head and saying that you will not do anything. When we spoke to the mayor and several of the city council members, the first thing they told us is that we approve of this project and it's a done deal. That was the beginning statement. And so that's what I mean about entrenched, is the fact that you can't inflict this upon the neighborhood and then turn your back on the neighborhood. And so again, as we move forward, even with electric, there are going to be problems. And all we ask is to be considered as people who should be considered and should be heard about the experiences that happen, and then have some resolution and discussion, and not be dismissed and called NIMBYs. So I think I've said my piece.
No, I appreciate that, and we certainly are committed to considering and working with you. And we had a series of meetings leading up to that point. By the time we got to the moment when we were in touch about it, the decision had been made, and that's how decisions work. But we went through a process before that, and we have and continue to hear and listen to and do our best to respond to your concerns. And so I appreciate you sharing them with us.
But our experience was that you heard with no action.
Thank you.
And I'm getting padded here, so I guess I have to sit down.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Hello, very interesting project. I live half a block from that site for the past 42 years. Chemical engineer, a lot of experience with some similar stuff, some UV projects. A few observations of the pumps versus the seaweed inflow and the trash strike. Handling solids, maybe they were specified just for liquid, just pumping water. Maybe if you do pumps again, grinder pumps, macerator pumps, more towelettes and sewer rats and whatever else designed to handle that. There are, rather than picking the water up, lifting it and running it through the UV module, another way to implement UV, if you think of like a tanning bed, you can find a chamber or 10 chambers upstream from there and put panels, lights in the manholes, zap it with some light energy. It's going to affect the biology of the water flowing through there, and you've done some good. It's more complicated. Your sampling plan might just be the same sampling plan. At the end of that pipe, you're going to sample it, and it has various effects upstream at satellite locations. So that might be a way to do it. Locate lights upstream, get rid of the noisy pumps. One thing I really wanted to get into the conversation into your matrix of options is maybe some oyster reefs off the shore. Oysters will eat 50 gallons of water a day and produce 200,000 eggs, and they don't need adult supervision, they don't need electricity, they don't need whatever, and whatever happens upstream still needs to happen. You still need to find all those bad pipes and fix them, because every pipe breaks eventually. But when the water flows into the ocean, the oysters will be there to eat it up. There's the Billion Oyster Project in New York. There's the Massachusetts Oyster Project. 150 years ago, those oysters thrived because of all the untreated wastewater going into their local waters. That's not a good thing. It's just a thing. But anyway, I'd like to put the plug in for the oysters and, you know, good luck with the next version. Anyone?
Thank you so much. Thank you. Other questions?
Good evening, afternoon, everyone. I'm George Allen. I live in Swampscott. I'm the chief scientist at a small company in Boston called NISCON. And environmental data analysis is what I do for my day job. So, needless to say, I've been looking at the data. And, first of all, thank you to everybody up there. It's a big project. It's a complicated project. And it was a good college try. That said, there are some limitations that need to be addressed going forward. I think, for me, the biggest go, no-go thing is that we apparently, correct me if I have this wrong, the intent was to collect flow data from both culverts, but when Liz told me last weekend that there was no flow data, my jaw kind of dropped to the floor. So assuming there isn't any, there's no mention of this in the Plain Valley report, that is a major full stop kind of issue because the flow data is extremely important. We see 5 million gallons a day tossed around, but I don't know if there's any data to support that. Flow data is important because the UV tank, again, my information needs to be confirmed, but I think it was 15 million gallons a day because that's what they had, as opposed to the pumps which are rated for 5 million gallons a day. So we have a tank that is largely oversized. I go down to the outfall and I look at the flow. And, I do it on a dry day, and I went down there this afternoon. On a dry day, it's well under 1 million gallons a day. It's probably more like 500,000 gallons a day. Today, it might have been 1. So, 5 million gallons a day as an estimate, that's an extreme worst case. You gotta when you have a rain event, you gotta let it go on the beach. There's no way you can control that. It's just gotta go. So the point is the system does not get sized for 5. It gets sized for maybe 1. And all of a sudden that opens up the possibility, which was on the table earlier, but then I think taken off. Could we pump it into the sewer system? If we limit that to no more than 1 million gallons per day, possibly less, you're taking care of probably 90% of the problems right there, boom. I suspect that would probably cost less than a full permanent UV solution, but I don't know. But I'm just throwing ideas out here. I don't want the pumping solution to be taken off the table, and and that's part of why we need the flow data. My eyeballs are kind of calibrated, but they're not. And we need it to be time resolved, 1 minute or better, and we need both culverts. So my suggestion going forward in the immediate future, before you do another pilot, get some flow, just the flow. We don't need anything else, just the flow. Get it in as soon as possible. Get 6 months of flow data under different rain conditions. Then we can figure out what we're actually dealing with, and we can go forward from there. Until you've got that, I'm sorry, it's full stop. Do not proceed. Don't spend any money planning because we don't know what we're going to be able to do. So we talked about the contamination between the effluent and the brook outfall. That is also a problem. And I did look at some of the data. I did compare the Eastern Ave DCR beach water quality, daily sampling, for days when the UV was running and days when it wasn't. A very simple on-off scenario. And looking at that using it's very highly skewed data, so you have to look at the median, not the mean. The median when it was on was lower, 23 when it was off, 12 when it was on, but the significance of that difference is not good. P equals 0.4, which means there's a 4% chance that that result is not real. It could just noise. You have a relatively small sample size and a very, very low setting. So we don't really know. If you look at the average, it was actually higher when the UV was on, but that's not the proper metric of central tendency when you have this kind of data set. So there's a suggestion that it works, but can you say that it worked, period? No. And I am concerned that using beach open days is a very poor and very noisy metric, And we need to see error bars on those 5 or 6 years comparison before you can say, yes, it actually did change the beach water line. So many of you have seen some of my analysis. Gino, you have not because you've been too busy. But now that you only have one job, I'm happy to share it with you, as well as anybody else here. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Does anyone here want to? I mean, just quickly on the idea of putting the stormwater into the sewer system, we've been told the EPA doesn't allow that, so that's why it's on the table. Right.
Hi, everyone. Is the mic working? Is it good? Hold it closer. So a couple yes or no questions. Was a PFMEA done? Was a PFMEA done, Kleinfelter? Yeah.
Yeah. Can you clarify?
Failure modes effect analysis? No.
I can't hear. Can you hold the mic right by your mouth?
I might sing some Elvis if I do that.
That'd be great.
A PFMEA.
No.
It's an analysis of what failure modes and what those impacts of failure modes might be. You didn't do that.
No.
Okay. Was a sound analysis done?
For the generator?
For what the system was going to output?
For the volume decibel level?
Yes.
For the generator itself or the whole system?
For the system.
We did some spot checking around the system, particularly close to the generator.
What did you get?
I don't know if I have it off the top of my head.
And Jeff just said they did one. Jeff, sorry, is that right?
Yeah.
Did one. It was exceeding the regulation.
Okay. So my next topic is one that you're not going to want to talk about, but I'm that kind of guy. So we're talking about a lot of data analysis. We're talking a lot about getting into the real granular side of whether UV is going to work or whether it's not going to work. I don't build a house unless I know where I'm going to put it. I don't design it. I don't do the structural analysis for the foundation. I don't see what the bedrock is until I know where I'm going to put the house. Okay? So I think it's pretty foolhardy to do additional analysis on and on, collect more data, look at more things, when no one's willing to commit to where the plant needs to be. Okay? So some of what Kleinfelter said in its evaluation was, we need to do something for the seaweed. We need to do something for the sand. We need to do something for contamination. Bottles, rats, whatever it is. So that tells me that wherever the UV system is going to go, it's going to need to be right at the outfall location. That's what it sounds like to me. Or else I wouldn't care about the seaweed going into the culvert, because the water would just be coming from somewhere else already treated. So in 2023, Kleinfelter picked 2 locations as potential candidates for a UV treatment facility. One was 3 New Ocean Street, where the Calgon pumping station, I guess it is, and Swampscott is, right? Not functioning, doing anything now. And then the other is the DCR Island between Humphrey Street and Lynchore Drive. So both of those are in a flood zone. The 2024 flood zone that FEMA put out about 2 months ago. And you know about that, Jared, because you worked on looking at that for the city. So you know that both locations are in a flood zone. And the island is in Article 97. Okay? Protected green space. So are any of you sitting there, Senator, Representative Mayor, are any of you, you're committed in this project, would you be committed to rescinding the Article 97 for the green space that DCR owns?
If I was a senator, I would.
All right, yeah. Yeah, no, thank you, Joe, for the question. I think, in your analogy that you would build a house without knowing the location, I think a public works project is just a different scenario. So, we decided to build a
Explain how.
school. Excuse me?
Explain how.
When we decide to build a school as a community, we decide we're going to build a school, and then we pick a location. We do a selection search. We decide we're going to build a road, then we figure out exactly where the road is going to go. When Kleinfeld did the feasibility report in 2023, part of the feasibility sort of gut check was are there locations where this could go theoretically, and the answer at that stage, based on what we knew at that moment, was yes, there's at least a couple. And then the goal of the pilot is to figure out if this actually works and how it could work. And we were able to get a lot of data. And I think the next step that we talked about before is to do even more analysis about what exactly we would need in a UV system, how big that would be, how you could situate it on the site. And before knowing the answer to those questions, we wouldn't be able to say exactly what kind of site we even needed to do a full site selection search. So, speaking for myself, I think it would be premature to rule in or out specific sites before having that feasibility analysis and including underground. Exactly. Right. Yeah, Senator Craig.
So if you look at this,
Senator Craig has
Yeah, no, so just in terms, you reference Article 97, I mean, I don't want to speak for the delegation, but, our role here is to support both communities. So certainly any legislative remedies, whether Article 97 or other means, we're here to support those efforts. I would say in terms of, a protected traffic island, certainly those bring benefits, shrubs, trees, other things, plants, absolutely. Our goal is to make a beach swimmable. For the first time in 42 years of living in Lynn, I swam at that beach and my family swam at the beach. Well, the traffic island, but I think the benefits to the public and to the environment are much more important to the beach. So I certainly would be willing, Article 97, again, we're trying to respectfully answer your question.
it's a yes or no.
I believe I said yes, all legislative remedies to help assist my communities. Is that clear?
So this is a headshot of the neighborhood. Can the people in the back hear when he doesn't have the microphone?
Can I get that's right. Representative Rodriguez.
I think you should grab the mic so the whole auditorium can hear you.
Sure. And then Representative Rodriguez.
So this is a headshot of the neighborhood where a UV system would go. Okay, what do you see here? You see residences. There are houses. They're densely packed. Where is a UV system going to go?
You're not listening to our.
No, I don't think you're listening. I don't think you're listening.
Finish the presentation that we have so much new information now. Several of our guests said that it's a changing in size. We're not talking about building a thing that's going to take up an entire lot in a neighborhood.
It could even be done underground.
You're not saying that.
Listen to what we've been saying. We learned so much through this process that there are ways to tweak this, build this.
I don't think Kleinfelter said that.
Excuse me?
Kleinfelter didn't say that.
We are saying.
You haven't said that.
Yeah, no.
We got this from
Yeah, we're not making this up.
Something in the ground.
So is that the only, the goal is to not take this island and ruin a neighborhood to clean a beach that no one goes to?
No one goes to?
Ridiculous. Oh my God. I'm so glad I'm not elected.
Here's the beach.
I live right by this beach. I live on the beach.
Oh, congratulations. You live a little closer than me. Don't be sarcastic. This is the beach.
You are sarcastic, sir, and you're not respectful.
This is the beach.
No.
Don't laugh.
Yes, don't laugh.
I'm not laughing. I'm talking
You are laughing. You're an ass.
I wasn't laughing. I was laughing at you.
Just to shift the tone a minute, I'm also a resident of that neighborhood, and I feel my heart breaks that some of our neighbors really did suffer from the level of sound, but that wasn't true of all people. And you have given so much effort to the study. I hear other individuals coming forth with possible other scientific options. All I know as a resident is I walk the beach twice a day with my dog, as I hear other residents, as we see the quality of what our summer was this summer. And there are a large number of people close by, beyond us, that have commented on the difference of what it means. We do live close to the beach, but we also have a responsibility to improve that beach. And it may cause us some inconvenience, but the overall benefit to the town and many families who haven't been able to play on that beach for years and years and years was so expansive for some days.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. I just want to add briefly. I appreciate that, and I appreciate the feedback. I appreciate this is a difficult conversation. We're not going to agree on everything, and obviously we're committed to having these conversations. That's why we're here. That's why we're doing the Q&A. I want to just emphasize that what the way the temporary UV pilot looked last summer would never be what the permanent facility would look like. Even based on what we knew then. I mean, the reason why ultimately I think we made the decision to do that is because we knew that it was only going to be in place for a summer, for 3 months. And I understand that it is a major inconvenience and very unwelcome for those neighbors in those 3 months. And I acknowledge that and understand that. But I just think it's important to point out that the way that affected the neighborhood was always going to be temporary. And I think that as we're talking here, we I think are working on ways of thinking about this that would be even less intrusive than was originally estimated. And because that sort of trade-off, that balance that you just mentioned is exactly what we are wrestling with and will continue to wrestle with. So thank you.
I just wanted to take a moment to thank everybody on the stage. This is a problem that's been around for a very long time, and we can argue about why it's been around for a very long time. But what I see up there is a lot of people, some volunteers that care a whole lot and that have come together to find a solution. So I just want to thank you all and commend you all and just say that I'm very grateful. My heart does go out to people that were affected this summer, and I'm glad that they're speaking up. I do want to say that I also live near the beach. We use the beach a ton this summer, so I'm very grateful for that just as a resident. And seeing all the families on the beach this summer, it's sort of awoken me to what's possible. Now that we're getting now that we have a lot of people that are committed, there are a lot of challenges here. And I think that's why even all these years later, we're still talking about it. So I just want to say that I don't have the solution here, I'm sorry. But I want to be part of the solution. And I just want to thank you all for standing up and having the political will to find a solution. So thank you.
I'm Mark Freeman from Swampscott, part of Save Kings Beach. I appreciate the study that was done, but I think there are some flaws. The main thing I'm concerned about is the fact that the outflow is still pollution, And yeah, great, the flow coming off the UV treatment is 10, 20, whatever, it's low, but there's some inherent contamination in the system. Any system that's going to be going forward with has to address where this other contamination is coming from. Because between where it's treated to the seawall to the culvert, there's some problems there. So we need to address that. Now, if they're going to even have it further back, let's say, away from the water, there's going to be maybe more chance of decontamination. So that needs to be addressed, I think. And the other thing about is the beaches, when they're open, when the treatment was undergoing, the beaches, I think 81, 82% open, and then when it was not shut off, I think the opening was about 71%. So there wasn't a large percent difference, I don't think, as far as when you're open, not open, when it was treated. So there have to be some other issues. I think George's idea, if we have the flow rates, to figure out whether we can add this flow to the sewage. But more investigation needs to be done before we can settle on this UV treatment, I think. We need to have all the options together again. Thank you.
Yeah, just to respond briefly to that, I think that absolutely, and I think that was one of the things that John mentioned in terms of figuring out what was going on at the end of the culvert there. Although I will point out that the ultimate measure here is of swimmability is going to happen in the actual beach itself. And while DPH collects the sample for the end of the culvert, it's for informational purposes, for the purpose of opening and closing the beach and their estimation of public health. The relevant testing point is in the ultimate water. And so clearly whatever's happening there is something that we want to learn more about, but it's saying it's not directly on point clearly to the UV system, because what's happening in the UV is determined by comparing the influent with the effluent, and then what is relevant for the sort of swimmability of the beach is the testing of the beach itself.
So can I finish a second? You're saying it's not relevant what's happening beyond the UV treatment? The UV treatment worked, but something between the treatment area and the beach, which basically doesn't make sense that the beach is closed, although the UV is okay. Great. You know, there's something not right.
Yeah, so I actually didn't say it's not relevant.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear you.
Okay, yeah, so I said I started by saying this is clearly a question that we want to work on. I think
yes,
John mentioned that it was a question that we needed to work on. Absolutely, this swimmability is key, and I said what's most relevant is the data that we're getting from the beach as opposed to the brook.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yeah.
Excuse me, Steve Harrington. There's a couple of things that are missing here. And I just lost my train of thought. But the first thing is we're pro cleaning up the beach. We've lived there for 30 years. We want this beach cleaned up. There's no question about that. The second thing is our issue is credibility. At the end of April, we met with several of you people. We had 30 residents there, and we were told this was quiet, this was safe, this was not intrusive, this was not. So when you tell us we're going to do something different next year, your credibility is at an all-time low, because not only did you tell us wrong initially, and you had to have known that information given all the data that we had with the machines, 72 to 78 initial decibels. What is it that's going to make us believe that you will do something different next year? That's the bottom line. I came within hours of losing my life because of the stress of no sleep and high decibel levels. Cortisol is released when there's constant noise 24/7. I mean, so for me to believe that it'll be underground or electric, and one of the questions I have, you had mentioned that you asked National Grid to increase the capabilities there. Can you tell me when you asked? Because that should have been asked in 2023 when the Kleinfelder report came out. Does anybody know when you actually approached them and they said, we don't have time enough to do it? Because it seems to me from 2023 to 2025, there would be 2 years to upgrade the electricity in that system. There's already a power grid right there.
Yeah, no, thank you. I appreciate that. And, you know, clearly we had different estimations of what the community impact was in last summer. And so, you know, I appreciate that. And that the resulting question. I'll say again, we're saying that getting power to the site would be a precondition of running another kind of system. And you know that's a commitment that I'm making, and I think my colleagues are making with me. I don't think that the request was put in 2023 because we weren't at a point as a group in 2023 where we were running with this at this level of implementation. It took a lot more work and back and forth for us to get from the 2023 report to the sort of late 2024 readiness to conduct a pilot. A lot of what happened in that intervening time was the sampling program that we did, and that was directly responsive to questions that we were getting from regulators, from DEP and EPA about that potential solution, because they had a lot of questions about the feasibility of it. So once we got to the point where we were seriously exploring the pilot, I think we made that request. I want to say it was the winter of 24-25, so last winter, yeah. And it was a request that we reiterated over the course of the spring, and that we've reiterated now again.
That was listed as a fatal flaw in the 2023 report. Doing diesel engines, that was listed as a fatal flaw, a fatal flaw in that report.
The fatal flaw for the 2023 report, diesel engines. Yeah, so I think it's probably, I don't have the report in front of me, but the report didn't get into a pilot, right? So if the report was commenting on diesel engines or power for the UV, that would have been for the permanent installation. So it's just not what we were doing last summer with running a pilot.
But I think the credibility issue, just to be kind of fair, is that you made a decision to use something that was inferior, that would harm people, and you made that decision. So you made it because it was convenient to do so, and it allowed you to move forward with the program. So that's what we're concerned about, is regardless of whether it's dangerous to constituents, you will make the decision again. Like, for instance, the 97 and the use of that park. Regardless of what that impact is, you see that the beach is the end-all be-all. So what you're saying is the end justifies the means. That's what we're concerned about. We're residents that we seem to feel like a pawn that you don't recognize, that you are saying that there is going to be sacrifices in this equation. That's the sacrifice. That's where our concerns are.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, and I am very confident saying that no one is looking to harm anyone, and we're not ignoring a particular need or consideration. We're doing what we think is in the public interest, in the best interest of the whole community. We can certainly disagree on that, and it sounds like we did and we do. But you know, that happens in these kinds of discussions, and I fully respect that.
Can I ask a question?
Valerie, I'm sorry, there's people in the back that have been raising their hands for a long time.
Yeah. Can I ask a question?
The gentleman in the green.
Okay. Does the machinery clear away oils, toxins, fecal matter, and trash that go into the beach from Stacy Brook and broken clay pipes? This physical, what happens is you can get rid of the bacteria, but does the machinery clean away oils, toxins, fecal matter, and trash that go to the beach from Stacy Brook and the broken clay pipes and things from the Swampscott areas that go into the beach. Does it clear it away, the physical matter?
I mean, the way the temporary pilot was set up, the physical matter was like sort of getting blocked in the pumps and the pipes, but that's not the purpose of the UV at all. The UV is just about killing the bacteria. So, yeah.
Okay.
Hey, thank you.
I didn't swim in the beach because I was concerned about the physical materials that were going into the beach, not just the bacteria.
Thank you. My name is Hugo Dolan. I'm actually not a resident. My sister is a longtime resident of Ocean Terrace, but I've used that beach for 35 years off and on, and spent a lot of time with my children growing up on that beach. So I appreciate all the work that you put in to this. My question had to do, if I'm understanding the slide right, with the UV system as a permanent solution. If I'm understanding the slide correctly, that when there's heavy rainfall, which is about 15–20% of the time, because of turbidity, the UV is not going to be sufficient to meet all these standards. And I'm not familiar with the consent decree or what EPA is requiring. So my question is really, assuming that there is a UV system as a permanent part of the solution, what are some of the things to deal with, well, certainly with other matter that is coming through the system? I know a lot of cities around the country, and I live in Washington, D.C., we spend a lot of time implementing systems with drainage from buildings into reservoirs for heavy rain events to keep that from getting into the overflow. So I'm just curious, like, and maybe it's beyond what you're dealing with today. I'm just curious, what is the solution beyond UV for the rest of those? Especially with all the new apartment buildings and increased flow, that sort of thing.
That's a really good question. The thing that makes Kings Beach unique in our region is the fact that our stormwater system is Stacy's Brook, and you have constant flow in dry and wet weather. Compare that to almost any other beach, especially in the metropolitan region, you don't have that. You have stormwater pipes that are flowing when it's raining. So a lot of our beaches have a wet weather problem. It's really common in urban areas in general. The reason there's so much focus on Kings Beach in particular is because of that dry weather flow. And I don't know if even permanent solution is the right word to be using, because the permanent solution is the one the first half of the presentation was on, which is fixing the pipes, doing the IDDE work, minimizing, or if possible, we don't know if it's possible, eliminating any sewage input into the stormwater system. That's the main goal. Ideally, that's so successful in that we don't need a permanent UV system. So yeah, to that point, it's, gosh, I'm forgetting now the main question.
So I think part of your question was about if you were reading the slide correctly, and yes, I think what we were seeing was that in rain events the effectiveness is low, particularly that first flush. But actually, I mean, if I could ask Chris to talk a little bit about what we think of a reasonable, attainable goal is for a clean beach.
Yeah. Thank you. One thing we saw with like really quick data analysis from just this summer is with the UV system, and yes, I know there's so many variables and it could be lots of different things in combination. For the first time in at least 10 years, if not longer, if I just look back at 10 years, Kings Beach was on par with other comparable beaches like Revere, Quincy, East Boston, other beaches that routinely score and are open 85 or higher, in many cases over 95%. But, if you get above 90 in a dense urban area, again, some of this information comes from like a community survey. years ago, like how often is it okay for your Olympic Beach to be closed? You know, no more than 20% of the time is what we heard, 15 years ago. But again, if you're over 90, you're getting an A, right? So like, again, it would be great if it's 100. But we live in an urban area. There's costs to that. So for the first time, Kings Beach was on par with these other beaches, whereas usually it's 30 or 40% below.
Can you hear me with my mask on? Yes. My question was for the Lynn water and sewer folks. I'm not a resident of Lynn, I live on Kingsmead Road. Did you say there were 70 properties left to look through the Marshall, or did you say 770? I wrote it down, but
We're targeting approximately 70 properties for testing.
70?
70.
70, okay. Yeah, I read it down, like 700 to 70. That doesn't seem possible. And also, you guys talked about a 26, I think, ending point timeline. Do you have a timeline on that? Oh, my first question was, you have to canvass, I'm assuming you canvass the neighbors to find out, do you have to get their permission to enter the property in order to do the testing?
So, IDE unfortunately has to continue forever because some of these connections could be put in inadvertently or down the road by just, something gets done that the wrong pipe gets connected to the wrong system. So it is kind of an expectation that you're doing IDD perpetually under the state's MS4 program.
Well, that's good to hear.
So as far as in Lynn, the Lynn Water and Sewer Commission has right of entry to anyone who is being served by their sewer system. So they, generally speaking, we do voluntary requests for access. We've had more success going door to door to gain property access for these tests, which take 10 to 15 minutes to complete. But that is right now it's voluntary access, but there is technically in the rules and regs for the commission that they have right of entry.
Okay, that's interesting. And I'm glad to hear that it's going to be ongoing because I know how old the pipes are. We've talked about it in the city. So that's encouraging to hear. But I just meant this aspect of the Marshall Middle School and we were talking about canvassing. Did you have like an ending on the turn of 26 for that portion of it? Or?
Right now, we're hoping to complete 2 canvassing events this fall. We're looking at including both weekdays and a weekend day to try and increase the potential for folks being home. But they will be pre-notified, so they can either schedule appointments or be home when the field teams are going around door to door.
So that's just the testing?
That's just to
Then
physically test
to the fixing
and try and verify connection.
Okay. Well, thanks, guys, for all the work that you guys are doing. And then for Kleinfelder, my heart goes out to the folks that live right in that neighborhood. I live a few blocks down, and I didn't have to deal with it directly, except when I was driving through there when I was walking. It is really loud, so I feel for them. I think it'll be helpful in your reporting. At the end, you listed I think it was just a line with numerous operational and maintenance issues that came up. I know for me, because I know initially they were shut down right away with seaweed, I think. I think it was like the first week of the seaweed shut it down. So for me, it would be helpful if you finished out that report with more specifics on exactly what you guys found that was wrong with the system. Does that make sense?
During the operation, the operational issues that we found? Is that what
Yeah,
you're
you said
referring
the
to?
maintenance issues, operational issues, the way it was running, why it was shut down. I know there was different issues that came up. I think it would just be to see that print what they were working on going forward if there is another potential pilot or
okay.
You know,
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi. I'm Wade Spritz from town of Swampscott. First, thank you for a lot of things. I mean, everyone between the volunteers and clearly we have our political leaders, elected leaders who really have been listening and taking note for the first time in many years to be able to come together and say, hey, let's fundamentally do something. My issue is not with the effort, my issue is with the study. And as a long time, 25-year career engineer, I'm disappointed with the study. I'm disappointed with the validity of some of the points in the study. Now hear me, Jen? Is that better? Sorry, okay. I'm fundamentally disappointed with how the study was written. I'm disappointed with the lack of any type of FMEA, which in the engineering community is something we call failure modes effects analysis, which basically says what can go wrong in a design of experiments and what do we need to do to be able to affect or manage it, right? So we were promised $1 million worth of taxpayer money between the two different towns, that we would have approximately 90 days worth of testing. We had roughly 52-ish days. That's $20,000 a day. And when I hear from Kleinfelder that, well, we don't know, we had the seaweed come in. Has Kleinfelder never been to the beach? With all due respect, that beach is loaded with seaweed. I'm just disappointed that we got 30% less data because of the inability of the upfront design of experiments to take into account what could have gone wrong. And the weir issue, yeah, do we have a leaking weir? If you're saying we probably did, then that kind of also throws out some of the data to understand what we spent all this money on. And that's where I'm disappointed. So let's keep going. And I'm not asking for a direct response, I'm just giving you feedback. So we didn't have flow, as George pointed out. One of the fundamental things that we were convinced of as the public was that this would help direct us to design a permanent system, right? It would give us real data. If you didn't take flow, how the heck are we supposed to know how it's sized? And furthermore, there was no details in the report as to what the tank size was, and if the tank was truly oversized, and was it appropriately, should we have not known and gotten something close to what we potentially could use so we could validate it? So I don't know if this is valid or not valid. Are we going to spend another $1 million on an experiment, another design of experiments to do the same thing over again? I don't think that's right. Now, the closed days versus the open days, I'll go back to what George was saying. No, there wasn't an improvement. If you look at the closed days versus the open days, you look at the median, what did this get us? It didn't get us very far. And it goes also to the issue, I mean, I know this is like, there's 13 layers of an onion, of an onion here, and just to kind of come out and say all this, it can get cloudy, so I appreciate this. But when these huge issues, as it's been said several times before, of yes, measure the tank, measures perfect, right? Because we know that obliterating viruses and bacteria with UV works. We've known this for however long we've been using UV. That's something we expected, that we knew that would happen. But the question becomes really, what is causing, and not just maybe a leaking weir, but is it possible that there's a reservoir of bacteria in there that's been sitting there for decades? How do we address that? Can we do some more testing to understand that no matter if we start dumping clean water, if Stacy's Brook is pure water, how do we, what is generating that other bacteria count? It's essential before we take another step. So, sizing information. Chlorine levels was another very interesting thing that was brought up in the report. So, is the chlorine levels coming potentially from the freshwater system, right? So we know that Lynn treats with chlorine several different components there. It's definitely got chlorine. And there's monochloramine coming from the Swampscott side. So is that indicating that we have direct infiltration? Or is that something potentially the chlorine levels from the seawater? I would like to see a little more definition to understand what that, how to interpret that information, okay? Getting down to the end here. We talked about pumping water back to Lynn Sewer. And Mayor Nicholson said that that wasn't allowed under the EPA rules. Well, let me ask you two other questions. One is that we have an underdrain that is regularly pumped. The underdrain runs underneath the sewer system, right? So that collects groundwater, and that's all being pumped to Lynn Water and Sewer. And then ask yourself the question, where do you think all that water comes from when we have 4 million gallons released from the other CSOs that aren't at Stacy's Brook? CSOs 3, 4, and 5, right? Just this last week, a 4 million gallon dump into Lynn Harbor. That's rainwater. It's being asked to be treated. So several more questions. Then goes back to the general group at the beginning here, which is if we are truly diverting all of, or we're trying to divert the pipes, where's all the rainwater intrusion coming from? Chris, so where is the rainwater intrusion coming from in order for the CSO releases to have to, we have rainwater intrusion into the main sanitary sewer system, right? So I'm, again, a 14th layer to the onion. I get it, right? Okay, so I'll kind of end it there. I thank you for your time. I just want to make sure that these issues are keenly addressed before another dollar is spent on another test. Thank you.
All right, we'll take one more question and then we'll wrap up the event. Is there anyone that hasn't asked a question? Oh, sorry.
I apologize. That was a long list. Thank you. We appreciate the feedback. Good feedback. What I can say is it's a pilot study in that we had some limitations. So I can address a couple of the points, and if you want to fire off a couple more to help me remember. But I think there was a question about the size of the unit versus flow. So it is based on a little bit larger tank than what we anticipated we would have flow for. But one, it was what was readily available to us to be able to do that work this summer. So there was a choice that we had to make, kind of balancing availability and doing something versus doing nothing. I think we talked about the flow metering. We did make valiant efforts to flow meter. We had flow meters on each influent pipe. Unfortunately, limitations in equipment didn't allow us to track that flow the way we had hoped in the beginning. We tried to note down flows as often as we could when we were at the site doing sampling. So we do have some, it's just not consistent data across the duration of the pilot because we didn't have real-time collection of data like we had originally planned. Again, we had to make some shifts for sure. Seaweed, we did anticipate. We have been to the beach. We know what it's like. I will say, if anybody can remember, right at the beginning of June when we were, I think it was about 2 days before we were ready to start up, we had an unusual June nor'easter. Does anybody remember that? Okay. And so we actually delayed starting for that to let that pass as we were concerned. However, it stirred up a lot in the ocean that we did not, it overwhelmed us, to be honest. But we regrouped and we figured out how to make it work. Lynn Water and Sewer, Swampscott did an amazing job helping us to manage it the remainder of the summer. But, it, you know, yeah, we can't say it wasn't an issue. The weir walls, yeah, so again, we tried to engineer that the best that we could, but it's a temporary system. We were putting, you know, wood into an active culvert. We gasketed it as best we could. Gasket is a kind of a rubbery material that helps to seal that opening between the wood and the concrete that is the culvert. Perfect? Not. So, you know, we don't think that there was a lot bypassing, but it could be. And I think, you know, our goal is just to be upfront about the limitations of the pilot in the way that it was set up. And I don't know, I think I touched on a few of your points. I'm sure I didn't touch on all of them.
One question.
Sure.
The CSO sys valve has been accepted. Lisa.
Yeah, all of our CSOs are real-time monitoring, and anytime that one of them goes over, we know about it, we report it. These are permitted as well. And the 006 outfall actually did overflow once this summer, and it was the first time in about 10 years.
That was my question. I appreciate that. That wasn't my question. My question is whether or not it's leaking.
No, it's not. It's a completely separate system.
I appreciate that.
Is there any final question? We have time for one more question. Someone has a question. All right. Well, thank you all so much for being here tonight and sharing your time, for sharing your perspective. Appreciate all the feedback and all the thought and all the question and all of your interest in this very important issue. I'd like to thank everyone that joined us up here for the effort that went into tonight and broadly for all your work together. This is a huge goal that our communities share to be able to clean Kings Beach, and we are so committed to getting it done and look forward to working with all of you to see that happen. So thank you so much.
Thank you.